Moving over to the National League, let's of course start with the Dodgers, the World Series champs, back-to-back champs, and it's kind of insane to think about the Dodgers and say that they really have holes in their lineup because they definitely have places that they could look to improve. You had Michael Conforto, who had a terrible season out and left for them. Perfect spot for Kyle Tucker to go play. Dodgers have $100 million coming off the books this offseason. I think that they would be silly to not go in on the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes. And then another area that I could see the Dodgers looking to add is the back end of this bullpen. Their pitching is just kind of always dealing with injuries, especially their bullpen. And then even when they were healthy, you had Tanner Scott who really struggled in that closer role for them. So I think they're going to look to add a different arm in the back end, move Tanner Scott to the setup role where he excelled with San Diego a couple seasons ago. So I think a guy that the Dodgers are going to look at is a guy like Edwin Diaz and Robert Suarez and Devin Williams, because I think they're going to be in on the higher end relief pitchers. Go get one of the better closers in baseball. And I think even a guy like Ryan Helsley, I think could be a good fit here. So I think they're going to look at closer, and I think they're going to be looking at an outfielder. And I do think that that outfielder is going to be Kyle Tucker. All right, next up, let's talk about the Padres. Disappointing end of the season for the Padres this season, losing to the Cubs in that wild card round. And I think there's a lot of talent on this team. You still look at that bullpen as one of the better units in baseball, even with the loss of their two-time All-Star closer in Robert Suarez. I think Mason Miller is going to fill into that closer role just fine. You've still got guys like Jason Adam and Estrada and Morahone back there. So I think they're going to be totally fine in the bullpen. I think where they need to add is in that rotation. You're losing Michael King, you're losing Dylan Cease. Yu Darvish has already been shut down for the 2026 campaign. So you're really kind of already scraping the scraps out of your AAA rotation to fill at the end of this rotation this next season. So I think they're definitely going to need to look to add. And I wonder if this is a team that looks at Tatsuya Imai coming out of Japan. I think the Japanese free agents, they do kind of always have that West Coast bias looking at teams like LA and Seattle and San Diego. So I think this would be a great fit for Tatsuya Imai. You're in a pitcher-friendly ballpark in Betco. You're in a team, you go to a rotation that desperately needs starting pitching. And then another place that they could look to add, I think they need to add either a first baseman or a DH. I wonder if they could re-sign, just re-sign a guy like Ryan O'Hearn, put him back at first base, and then maybe move Gavin Sheets to a designated hitter. Next up, we've got the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks were another one of the more disappointing organizations this last season, really just due to their pitching and how bad it was. Ryan Nelson, Eduardo Rodriguez, Brandon Pfaadt are kind of set to be the 1, 2, 3 this next season, and that's just not the way to go. Corbin Burns did go down with Tommy John, so we don't really know what the timetable is on that as of right now, but he more than likely will not be pitching for the majority of 2026. So they definitely need to go add to this rotation. And I think a guy that they could be looking at is actually in the trade market. I think this would be a really nice fit for Sandy Alcantara from Miami. Now, we'll get to this when we get to Miami. I don't think the Marlins should trade any of their starters. I think they will. But I think if they get look to trade a guy like a Edward Cabrera or a Sandy Alcantara, I think Arizona should be on the phone to try to get one of them over. I think they do still have prospects to make that happen. Obviously, you did get a lot out of both Josh Naylor and Eugenio Suarez. So I think this is a team that's going to look to add in the rotation. I think they also need to look to add at their holes at first and third base. And I think this might be the Paul Goldschmidt spot, just going back to Arizona, maybe on a 1, 2 year deal, and then he might just retire a Diamondback. And I wonder if this is a team that looks at Munetaka Murakami to come play third base or maybe first base DH for them. Murakami, obviously the power bat coming out of Japan, did have his strikeout struggles, so I wonder how cautious teams are going to be with that. But I think he would be a really nice bat to add, kind of try to make up for the power that they lost in Josh Naylor and Eugenio Suarez this last season. So I think they need to look for a power bat but more importantly, they need to look at starting pitching. Moving on, let's talk about the Giants. The Giants did get off to a hot start in 2025. Were leading the NL West for a little while, had the best record in baseball for a little while, did end up falling off. And the Giants, I think they are close. I think they are just a couple of guys in the lineup away. And Buster Posey has kind of made it clear that he wants to win in San Francisco. He wants to build a contender. So I think this is a team that's going to be aggressive in free agency. I wouldn't be surprised if they go and make some big contracts. I think the Giants should be all in on Kyle Tucker to go play right field for them. Then you have Helio Ramos, Jung-Hoo Lee, and Kyle Tucker out there in the outfield. I think they also could look to add a second baseman. Maybe this is a team that looks at a guy like Bo Bichette. Maybe this is a team that looks at going and trading for Brendan Donovan. So I think they need to add a couple of bats, probably multiple bats. I think they need an outfield bat, and I think they need a second baseman. Looking at this rotation, I think Logan Webb, Robbie Ray are the best 1-2, maybe in all of baseball. They're two of the best pitchers. This is a bullpen that lost a lot of pieces this last season. You had Tyler Rogers and Camilo Doval get traded away. You had Randy Rodriguez go down with Tommy John surgery. So Ryan Walker is kind of the only guy that's left out of that kind of four-headed monster they had at the back end of that bullpen. So I think relief pitching is definitely something they're going to be looking to add. And I think this could be an interesting spot for a guy like a Luke Weaver, who's kind of got experience in that setup role and he's also closed out games. I think he would mesh really well with Ryan Walker, who has at times struggled when he was given that closer role. Next up, the Colorado Rockies. And the Rockies are a team that they're definitely going through it right now. They have a lot of young talent on this team. Hunter Goodman was an all-star last year, one of the best catchers in baseball, one of the most underrated players in baseball. You still have guys like Ezekiel Tovar and Brenton Doyle in there. And then you did kind of have pleasant surprises in guys like Mickey Moniak, who you got on a minor league deal. You had Warming Bernabel kind of come up mid-season from AAA, who played nicely at times. But I think this is a team that is just forever going to be so unattractive to pitching because no one wants to pitch in that ballpark. I think it's really hard for them to go out and just get a big pitching free agent. So it's kind of tough to see and say where the Rockies add because they can look at these starting pitchers, but you look through this list and it's like I can't see the vast majority of these guys even really wanting to go pitch for Colorado. Maybe if you go like farther down, you can go talk to a guy like a Michael Soroka. Maybe you can talk to like Griffin Canning guys that are probably not going to see too much interest from top teams. Maybe guys like Chris Paddock. I don't see a lot of guys. Maybe Paul Blackburn, Jordan Montgomery. I just really don't see a lot of guys that are going to express interest in Colorado. So it's really hard to say where they're going to add.
Moving over to the NL Central now, the first team we're going to talk about is the Cubs. Now, the Cubs already kind of off to an interesting offseason already. They traded Andrew Kittredge back to Baltimore, and then they went out and they signed Phil Maton in to help out that bullpen. I think that's just kind of replacing Kittredge in that setup role, mid-relief role. They got Shota Imanaga to sign and accept the qualifying offer, so he'll be back on a 1 year deal for the Cubs. But I do think the Cubs still need to look to add into the rotation. You see guys like Justin Steele, Matthew Wood, and Tyone set to get significant playing time in this rotation that are just kind of they all have question marks. So I think a great fit for the Cubs is to go look at a guy like Dylan Cease. This is a team that really struggles as far as velocity goes in that rotation. They don't really have any guys that are going to throw heat at you. They don't have any guys that are going to throw you a 97, a 98, anything like that. And at his best, Dylan Cease can touch 100 on the fastball. So I think that would be a really nice add for them. He can go at the front. Maybe he can go second in the rotation behind Shota or behind Cade Horton. Whatever they decide to do, if that's the route they go. I think they still need to add to the bullpen. I think Daniel Palencia at times was very inconsistent in that closer role. I think they could look to add a closer, Or maybe they look to add more of a versatile guy, someone like a Kirby Yates or a Luke Weaver that could close games, could set up games, or maybe they just go for a full closer. I think Devin Williams would be a really nice fit for the Cubs. He's going to be a much cheaper option than if they were to go after like the top guy, go after the Edwin Diaz. So I think a Devin Williams would be a nice fit for the Cubs. And then the big question for them is obviously, what are we doing about Kyle Tucker? And I'm sorry, I just really don't see him going back to Chicago. So I think if they're going to look to add an outfielder, maybe they go try to get a guy like Cody Bellinger back in Chicago. I don't really see it. I think they're just going to be content with what they have and give guys like Alcantara and Owen Casey some playing time in right field. And then I think Suzuki's just going to go to full-time DH for them.
Moving on, we've got the Brewers. The Brewers, they had a fantastic season, ultimately fell short in the NLCS when they just seemingly ran out of gas. So I think this is a team that definitely needs to add to the lineup, just get some better bats in there because the on base kind of singles and stealing bases, it only got them so far. I think they need to add power. And I think this is the dream spot for a guy like Eugenio Suarez. Now, you might be thinking they don't really need the third baseman. Caleb Durbin came up, had a nice season for them. I think you could get Eugenio Suarez, put him at first base. You could put him at third, maybe move Caleb Durbin to first. I think you need to be able to be flexible there because you need to be able to go get a power bat. I think the Brewers should also give Munetaka Murakami a look. I don't think he would ever go to Milwaukee, but I think that would be a nice fit to come play first base for them. Or I think they could go get a guy like a Ryan O'Hearn and platoon him at first base with Andrew Vaughn, add a little more power to this lineup. Moving over to the Reds. The Reds had a nice season, did sneak into that playoffs before they got bounced by the Dodgers in 2 games. I think the Reds had a sneaky good season, and I think the Reds could look to add in this offseason. I think you look at this rotation, as long as they maintain everybody, I think they're okay with the five they have. I think Hunter Green, Andrew Abbott, Nick Lodolo, Brady Singer, and then you have Chase Burns at the back end for a full season. I think that's a nice 1 through 5. I think you are looking at the bullpen here, but I think getting a guy like Emilio Pagan back in that closer role is going to be just fine for them. So I think they definitely need to look at adding a bat, and I think the Reds need to be going all in on Kyle Schwarber. He would hit 50 plus home runs a year in that ballpark. He would fit fantastically in the DH spot. You can move Gavin Lux just back out to left field. And then maybe if you want to still play Will Benson, you can put him in right. But I do think that they need to add a bat, whether that is a guy like Schwarber at DH. Maybe they go in on Eugenio Suarez to come play third base, but I think they need to add a power bat to this lineup. The Cardinals. The Cardinals are a team that needs to embrace the rebuild. I think they're going to look to sell big this offseason. I think guys like Brendan Donovan, I think guys like Lars Nootbaar, I think guys like Arenado, Wilson Contreras, maybe even Sonny Gray. I think all of those guys could be available on the trade block just because I think the Cardinals have no direction. I don't think that with this team, they're going to be ascending back into contention for in that Central Division, especially with how good that division was this last season. You had 3 playoff teams. So I think the Cardinals just need to embrace the rebuild, capitalize on the value that they have in guys like Donovan, who could bring back a good package, guys like Sonny Gray, who teams are always looking to add front end pitching. I think there's a lot of value in guys that they have that they're just not doing anything with. So I think the Cardinals this offseason need to embrace the rebuild and just sell a lot of the top end players that they have left. Moving on, we got the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pirates, a team that is so frustrating because you look at the pitching, they have one of the best 1, 2, 3 punches in baseball with Skeens, Jared Jones, Mitch Keller. Now, there's always talks about Mitch Keller being available via trade, so we don't really know if he'll be there come opening day. But you look at the rotation and you think it's just fine. It's the lineup that is the problem. And you look at this lineup and there's maybe 2 established major league quality bats in O'Neill Cruz and Brian Reynolds. So this is a team that needs to add bats wherever they can, and it's just hard to say because the Pirates don't spend money. They refuse to spend money. And so I think the Pirates, they literally just need to go get any bats, literally any position. Go get a catcher, go get an infielder, go get an extra outfielder. It will be an improvement. Maybe you sell off of a guy like Mitch Keller and you bring back a major league quality bat or two to play in your infield or maybe your DH spot. But it's hard to just pick one spot that they need to improve in because they could use a whole new infield. They could use a new left fielder. You could use a new catcher. You could use probably a reliever or two, but we're not even really going to go there because that's just not the Pirates. That's just not what they need. They need bats. But we all know Bob Nutting just doesn't like to spend money, so it's not going to happen. Now moving over to the NL East, let's first talk about the Phillies. The Phillies, of course, had that disappointing end to the season against the Dodgers in that division series. And the Phillies are going to be one of the more interesting teams, one of the teams that I'm keeping an eye on this offseason because they're losing a lot of talent, especially in this lineup. You're losing JT Realmuto, you're losing Kyle Schwarber, and you're losing Harrison Bader. So I think this is a team that they definitely need to look into retaining a lot of those guys. I think Harrison Bader was outstanding for them after they went and traded for him, got him out of Minnesota. I think Kyle Schwarber is one of the faces of this franchise. I think the city of Philadelphia loves him. I think he loves the city. I think he wants to stay. So we'll see if they can get a deal done. But I also think they could just use another guy in the outfield anyways. So I think this is another team that needs to look at Kyle Tucker to go play right field. You can maybe move Brandon Marsh to center if you don't get Harrison Bader back. You can use him kind of as a platoon guy. And then I think they need to trade off Nick Castellanos. But if they, for whatever reason, they can't get Kyle Schwarber back, then they can just use Castellanos as a full-time DH. Now moving over to the Braves, and the Braves were one of the more disappointing teams this last season. They were one of the teams that I thought was going to be contending with the Dodgers for that National League title. And you look at this lineup, and there's a lot of talent here. You've got a very good established lineup. The only really hole here is kind of a shortstop with Nick Allen. So I think they're gonna go look for a shortstop. I could see them just bringing back Ha-Sung Kim for a full season, maybe on a 1 or 2 year deal to play shortstop for them. I could also see them going after Bo Bichette to play shortstop for them, get another good bat. He can maybe lead off for them in front of guys like Profar and Acuna. I think they could also look to add into the bullpen. They're losing Raisel Iglesias to free agency. I do think that they're probably going to bring him back and he will fit into that closer role again. And then they might just look for kind of a mid rotation or a setup guy because the rest of this bullpen is kind of just not very good. Aaron Bummer might be your best name left outside of Dylan Lee and Joe Jimenez, who are kind of in here set as your closer. But I think they go get Raisel Iglesias. Maybe you look at some other names to be in that setup role. But I think the Braves, they kind of just have a couple holes to fill in shortstop and at the back end of the bullpen. And then they just need to be healthy. And they should be back into National League contention.
Moving on, let's talk about the Mets. The Mets were probably the most disappointing team in baseball. They had such high expectations after the Juan Soto signing, and then they missed the playoffs entirely despite Juan Soto nearly going 40-40, just falling a couple stolen bags short. And so the Mets are kind of a weird team to look at. They already made a big move trading Brandon Nimmo just straight up 1-for-1 for Marcus Simeon, move that I really don't care for. As far as the Mets go, I don't think second base was your most pressing need, and I think losing Brandon Nimmo hurts you more than Marcus Simeon helps you. So now they have a big hole in left field. I don't hate Jeff McNeil, but I don't think he is the best you can do. So maybe this is another team that looks at Kyle Tucker, throws him in left field across from Juan Soto and right. That would be really fun. They also need to go get Pete Alonso back realistically just get a corner infielder. I think just getting Pete Alonso back would be the best move for them. If for whatever reason they can't get him back, maybe they're another team that looks at Munetaka Murakami. He can play first base for them. Maybe he DHs, but I think he'd play first, and then you can move Mark Vientos back over to third. As far as this rotation goes, I think it is just fine. There's kind of the rumors going around that maybe this is the team that trades for Tarek Skubal takes one of the young guys like Nolan McLean, packages them with another couple of prospects and a major league bat to go get Skubal, which I'm not against if I'm the Mets. I think obviously Tarek Skubal, one of the best pitchers in baseball, he would obviously be a big help, but I just don't think that's a need. I kind of just like their rotation the way it is now with a lot of those young guys, and then you mix in the vets, you mix in the Sean Manaea, the Peterson, the Clay Holmes. I think their rotation's just fine. And then I think as far as the bullpen goes, just re-sign Edwin Diaz. I don't think he's going to go anywhere else. I think they might even be able to get him on like a team-friendly deal, get him on a cheaper deal than maybe he would go get somewhere else.
Moving on, we got a team that I am going to be keeping a very close eye on in the Miami Marlins. Now, as I kind of mentioned briefly a second ago, I think the Marlins should keep all of the pitching they have. Maybe an unpopular opinion. I think this Marlins team is pretty close to being a playoff contender. You had a lot of emerging bats this season. Kyle Stowers, Jacob Marcy after the call-up. Augustine Ramirez had a nice season. Offensively, excuse me, even though he wasn't the best behind the plate. And then I think you look at the pitching they have, Yuri Perez, Sandy Edward Cabrera, and then guys like Weathers and Meyer are a fine 4 and 5. And then you look at the bullpen, they could look to add a closer. I think this would be a very nice team to go out and get Devin Williams. He's going to be cheaper coming off an up and down season. I think he'd be a great fit in the back end of this bullpen. You can move guys like Fauché and Enriquez to the kind of setup role that they kind of all split because the Marlins have not really had an established closer since they traded Tanner Scott. So I think this is a team that is closer than many think. I think they just need to add an established closer, and then you kind of look at the offense. I think they could use a defensive minded catcher. Maybe this is a team that looks at getting JT Realmuto back. I think you could use him, start him behind the dish every day, and then you can just DH Augustine Ramirez, who's good with the stick but not as much behind the plate. And moving on, you've got what is, in my opinion, the most forgettable team in all of baseball, the Washington Nationals. Now, the Nationals, they have a lot of guys that I like on this team. You've got Mackenzie Gore, you've got Keibert Ruiz, CJ Abrams, James Wood, Dylan Cruz. They do have some young talent sprinkled throughout, but I think this is a team that's just kind of really far away. So I wonder if they do kind of succumb to what the trade rumors are, and they do really get rid of Mackenzie Gore. There's talks about him being available via trade. You've got teams like the Mets and the Cubs who are kind of always linked to those pitching trade targets being kind of connected to him. So I wonder if that's something they do. They might hang on to him for another year as he gets closer, maybe look to trade him at the deadline or next season. But I think the biggest hole on the Nationals lineup right now, if I just had to pick one, I'm looking at first base. They're losing Josh Bell, who was okay for them this past season, excuse me. And I wonder if this is a team that goes after Luis Ariz. Now, when I went through the first time, went through all these teams, I actually went a totally different route. I kind of soloed out guys like Reese Hoskins and Ryan O'Hearn to play first base for this team, but I'm looking at this lineup again, and I wonder if a guy like Arias, who's more of the on base singles guy, you could use him to get on and set the table for a guy like James Wood, who's got the power, can bring him home. I think that would be a fun fit for the Nationals to put a little more offense on the board.
But that is it for this video. Let me know in the comments below what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong. The American League version of this video is already up on my channel, so go check that one out if you haven't already. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.